Hey, this is Brookes. I've got some time, I've got an idea, and I've got a cup of coffee. So let's forge a character. So the character I'm creating this week is actually a crossover with the main character design forge video series that I've been making in the last few weeks. Because, Marvel thinks that they're all ambitious with their crossovers, and I thought, no one's ever crossed over with themselves. I'm going to let that reference die in the week that this is uploaded. So the character that I'm creating here is meant to go along with the character I'm making in that series. And sort of the conceit with that series of videos is usually I'm time-lapsing my artwork and process like you're seeing right here. I'm taking a few hours worth of work and editing and compressing them down into a few minutes so that you can kind of see things, sort of a bigger picture of things without actually spending all those hours watching. But I thought as a change of pace with that video series, I would walk you through what I'm doing, not speeding anything up, and sort of talking you through my process as it goes. But in case anyone was worried that that was sort of the new norm for videos on this channel, hopefully this one at least proves that that's not the case. So I wanted to create a familiar for this character that's not necessarily that familiar. A character who is a Griffin, but also an alley cat. So a little bit of background on that. This character is meant to be a street urchin, who is also a bard and a scout, which is a lot of different aspects altogether. But the prompt for this character was that they live in a world of bards, and they would need a secondary role to play in that world. So this character I decided was going to be a street urchin who was also a scout who was able to sort of visualize things from a distance and kind of stealth around a little bit like a rogue. And the idea of the character is that she is, of course, poor and penniless and homeless, but wears a very gaudy garment because she's very vain and sort of thinks highly of herself despite the position that she's in. So the idea of this familiar character is that it's a sort of like an alley cat, but also has all of those aspects of a bird, being able to fly and scout long distances, and sort of having that same attitude that a cat can have, a very pompous and arrogant air about the character. Now, before I did any kind of character design or exploration of the character themselves, I actually did a few studies that you notice up in the top left-hand corner, those first things that I drew, which are actually just studies of reference photos of cats. And there were a few different ones that I found. They're a posh cat, a very thug-like cat, and sort of a whimpering, pathetic-looking kitten. And I thought between those three things, it was a really nice sort of balance that I was looking to get with the Griffin character. Then, of course, I brought in the pose of the other character that this one goes along with to complement them, kind of positioning them where they should go with the character, and then tried a few different poses. So the one that I ended up with here is very kind of sulking, and I just made sure that I had a good kind of perspective with where they went. And as far as the Griffin attributes of the character, I tried to keep them pretty slim, keeping most of the character cat-like, and then changing the feet and the beak. Now, you don't notice it here yet because it's something I add later on in the color process, but I also gave the character just a little pair of wings, which I thought were just mostly practical for our character to kind of send out a little bit like a falcon or, a carrier pigeon. To kind of sell that alley cat nature, I made sure that there was sort of some missing hair on the tail there. It's kind of a trope that gets used a lot with cats that you find on the street. Here you see me blocking in the color for the character using a very bright sea green. It's obviously a color I'm not going to use in the final version of the character, but something with a lot of contrast off of the background so that I can control the edges. Now, what I do with the edges is typically overfill them so that it's extending beyond the boundaries of that line art. And then I come back with a smaller eraser and kind of chip away. And especially with something like fur that has very wispy edges as you're creating the silhouette, that was really helpful. Now, it's not so much of a problem, but the only kind of complication or hang up that I have here is the fact that I haven't actually created a color palette or colored the main character that this one goes along with. So ideally, what I would have done was create her palette first, and then because this character is meant to be a complement to her, just create a palette that complements that palette. And so really, if her palette was going to be in this sort of earthy and red set of tones, he would be something probably either at least orange, if not completely green, right? Green being the opposite of red as a complementary color. But I think ultimately, even if her color palette is similar to this one, they'll go together well. Here you see me adding the wings. Without any kind of line art, I just studied a few photos of actual bird wings and used the limited colors that I had to lay out a few of the feathers there. Ideally, I would have added those wings first within the sketch and allowed them to contribute something to the silhouette of the character. If you took the wings away as they are right now, or if you just looked at a silhouette of the character, you don't really see anything other than kind of the little bump of the one behind. Now, otherwise, I think if I had thought about the wings a little bit earlier, they would be a little bit more spread out or contributing something to the overall silhouette. I also added a little bit of molting, those sort of white fluffy feathers kind of tattering around the edge of the wings, and that was something to kind of go along with the whole ratty alley cat nature. It's something that I think I see pigeons with a lot of that sometimes in New York City and stuff, and so it got me thinking along the lines of, like, is this character covered in fur or feathers? And I think ultimately it's maybe a little mix of both, or whatever ends up looking cool, or maybe it's just up to you. I duplicated the flat layer of color that I had and made it a little bit darker, and then erased away from it in order to get some definition on various parts of the character. And after that, I created a multiply layer over everything for a little bit more shadow. And honestly, the darker the better with this character, because I like the sort of creepy vibe that it gives off, and the only really light part of the character being the sort of glow of the eyes, which I wouldn't really call inviting. Overall, I'm actually really happy with how this character came out, and I think that the reference studies that I did at the beginning contributed a lot to the character overall. I'm excited to add this character back in with the character it goes with, and finally finish up the Realtime Character Design series in my next video. That's it for me today. I'm making 2 new videos a week here on Character Design Forge. Subscribing on YouTube lets you know when new videos are made available. My username is BagelDenizen on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch, so follow me there for updates if you'd like. And if you want to support me and this channel, you can go to patreon.com/BagelDenizen, and you can get a ton of stuff in return, including things like high-res versions of this character and other Forge a Character videos, Procreate files, Photoshop files, layered, working, high-res. You can kind of take them apart and look at them, see how I put them together. And at the Novice Bard tier, you actually get personalized video critiques from me that can totally help you with leveling up your own art. Thank you so much for watching, and have fun creating!